There's something about a poolside photo that says more than any press release ever could. A 46-year-old woman, silver bikini, lounging in the sun, and a caption that hit differently knowing what had just happened. You're in your 40s and realize peace is the new luxury. No name mentioned. No drama teased. Just a quiet statement from a woman who had clearly been through something and decided she wasn't going to perform grief for the internet. That woman is Jacqueline Cordero. And the something she'd just been through was the end of a 3-year relationship with one of the most famous, most controversial, and most complicated athletes America has ever produced, Alex Rodriguez. But to really understand why this breakup matters, you can't just start at the split. You have to go all the way back. Not just to the beginning of their relationship, but to everything that made A-Rod the man he became. Because the story of Alex Rodriguez is not just a love story. It's a rise, a fall, a scandal that redefined an era, and a man still trying to figure out who he actually is when no one's watching.
And right now,
things are getting very interesting. Before she was A-Rod's girlfriend, before the tabloid headlines, before any of this, Jacqueline Cordero was a nurse. A trained healthcare professional from Windsor, Ontario, Canada, who quietly decided one day that she wanted more and rebuilt herself from scratch into one of the most disciplined fitness entrepreneurs in the industry. She created her own 6-week transformation program called JackFit and launched another initiative called the 5 a.m. Club, focused entirely on building punctuality, organization, and the kind of positive daily habits that most people talk about but never actually follow through on. She didn't chase fame. She built something real. Over 135,000 Instagram followers who come to her not for drama, but for accountability. People who want results. People who want to be pushed. And the woman doing the pushing spent years as a nurse before she ever posted a workout video. That background matters, because it tells you something about who Jacqueline Cordero actually is beneath the surface. She understands discipline. She understands sacrifice. And she understands that transformation doesn't happen overnight. What most people miss is just how perfectly her world aligned with Rodriguez's at the time they met. A-Rod, by 2022, had completely reinvented himself after the wreckage of his baseball career. He was leaning hard into health, structure, and purpose-driven living. And here's a woman who had literally built a business out of teaching other people to do exactly that. Sources close to the couple at the time said she had helped many of her clients realize their dreams of a toned physique and healthy lifestyle through her personalized programs. 2 people who had remade themselves entirely. On paper, that should have been a recipe for something lasting. And for a while, it genuinely seemed like it was. But before we get to what eventually fell apart, you need to understand the full weight of the man Jacqueline was stepping into a relationship with. Because A-Rod's history isn't just complicated. It's a masterclass in how much one person can achieve, destroy, and somehow survive, all in a single lifetime. The first time the world caught a glimpse of them together was October 17, 2022, spotted walking hand-in-hand down Rodeo Drive in Beverly Hills, stopping at a chic boutique along the way. No staging. No red carpet. Just 2 people who clearly weren't trying to hide anymore. The cameras caught it. The internet ran with it. And suddenly, everyone was asking the same question. Who is she? The timing was notable for another reason entirely. The sighting came just 2 months after Rodriguez's split from fitness influencer Catherine Paget, with sources noting they remained good friends despite the separation. Which, if you've followed A-Rod's personal life at all, starts to feel like a pattern. Dramatic endings that somehow land softly, at least on the surface. But we'll get into that pattern in detail shortly because it reveals something important about the way this man moves through relationships. Back to Jacqueline. Sources close to Rodriguez at the time confirmed that the pair bonded immediately over their shared obsession with fitness and their mutual devotion to family. The insider was direct about it. Rodriguez would not seriously date anyone who wasn't fully committed to daily fitness. It wasn't a preference. It was a requirement. It was that central to his identity. And Jacqueline didn't just check that box. She practically invented it as a career. By December 2022, the mystery was completely gone. Rodriguez made it Instagram official in the most deliberate way possible. A Christmas photo, a decorated tree, his 2 daughters Natasha and Ella standing right there beside him and Jacqueline. It wasn't a paparazzi shot leaked without permission. It was a conscious choice. A statement posted publicly, on his own account, with his children in the frame. That's not a man testing the waters. That's a man saying, "This is my life now, and she's in it." He captioned it warmly, tagging the holidays, family, and gratitude. The world took note. And yet, knowing everything that came before Jacqueline, and we mean everything, the question was always quietly hanging in the air. Was this the one that would finally last? Or was history about to repeat itself in a way nobody saw coming? For the next 3 years, Alex Rodriguez and Jacqueline Cordero looked like exactly what a modern, disciplined, purpose-driven couple is supposed to look like. They weren't just dating. They were building something, or at least that's what the public image suggested. Two fitness-obsessed people, two sets of daughters, one blended family that seemed to genuinely work. They traveled together. They showed up to each other's professional world. They were photographed at events, including major charity galas and high-profile industry nights. By Thanksgiving 2024, the picture was almost storybook. Rodriguez posted warm family dinner images with a caption, "Thankful to be surrounded by this beautiful group of family and friends. So proud of our blended family, staying together through thick and thin." That caption, looking back now, hits a little differently. Staying together through thick and thin. Words that aged about as well as most of A-Rod's carefully crafted public statements. Jacqueline, for her part, was never playing a supporting role. She continued building her brand throughout the relationship, posting workout content, inspirational messages, and lifestyle advice for her growing audience. She maintained her 5 a.m. club philosophy, her JackFit programs, and her identity as a fitness entrepreneur entirely independent of who she was dating. She wasn't trying to become A-Rod's girlfriend. She already had her own thing. That independence, ironically, may have been one of the most attractive qualities she brought to the relationship, and possibly one of the most complicated. Because here's the thing about Alex Rodriguez. He is, by his own admission, a man who has spent most of his adult life chasing something he can never quite hold on to. Success? Absolutely. Wealth? Without question. But the kind of quiet, settled peace that Jacqueline was posting about from that lounge chair? That has always seemed just slightly out of reach for him. And by early 2026, quietly and without any public announcement, that 3-year chapter was already ending. Here's the detail that most headlines glossed over. According to a source close to the couple, Rodriguez and Cordero had actually been separated for roughly 2 months before the public confirmation ever happened. 2 months. That means while the world was still assuming everything was fine, while fans were still tagging them in couple posts and asking when they'd get engaged, it was already over. Privately. Quietly. The way things apparently end when two grown adults decide to handle something with more class than the tabloids deserve. When Jacqueline finally confirmed the split to TMZ on May 21, 2026, the statement she gave was almost startling in how composed it was. She said they were taking time apart. She emphasized mutual love, care, and deep respect for each other and for both of their families. No blame, no shade, no strategic leaking of grievances through anonymous sources. She specifically asked that any media coverage reflect the compassion and privacy that the situation deserved, and she revealed that she was simultaneously dealing with a serious health matter involving a family member, understandably making that her primary focus. That last detail reframes the entire story. This wasn't a woman nursing a broken heart in public. This was a woman managing something far more painful and real, privately, while the world demanded she perform a breakup for their entertainment. And her response to all of it? She posted a poolside photo about peace. Not bitterness. Not grief. Not a carefully worded clapback. Just peace. The post featured her lying on a lounge chair in a silver bikini, with a lengthy caption that began, "POV, you're in your 40s and realize peace is the new luxury." She went on to break down 3 principles: protecting your time, accepting what you can't control, and making space for yourself without guilt. She signed it simply with her name and a heart. No drama, no performance. Just a woman choosing herself. And while Jacqueline was choosing peace, The man she'd spent 3 years with was doing what he always does, keeping busy, staying visible, and running from the kind of stillness that might force him to reckon with what he keeps leaving behind. Because if you look closely at the full arc of A-Rod's life, a pattern emerges. One that started long before Jacqueline and shows no signs of stopping. Let's talk about the pattern. Because Alex Rodriguez's romantic history isn't just a list of famous names. It's a recurring story about a man who keeps reaching for connection and keeps, somehow, watching it slip through his fingers. Rodriguez was married once to Cynthia Skirties from 2002 to 2008. Together they had 2 daughters, Natasha and Ella. The marriage ended in divorce, and even in that split, the public version was civil. After Cynthia came a string of high-profile names, Kate Hudson, Cameron Diaz, and Wojcicki. All accomplished, all striking, all relationships that generated headlines and then quietly faded. But then came Jennifer Lopez. And that one was different. Rodriguez and Lopez first met at a baseball game in 2005, reconnected in 2016, and officially began dating in February 2017. For the next 4 years, they were one of the most talked-about couples on the planet. The kind of pairing that made sense on every level. 2 Latino icons from New York, both world-class in their fields, both deeply family-oriented, both obsessed with legacy. They got engaged in March 2019 while vacationing in the Bahamas, and Rodriguez later said he had practiced the proposal 3 days in a row because he wanted the sunset to be absolutely perfect. And then it all fell apart. Rumors swirled that a key factor in the breakup was an alleged DM exchange between Rodriguez and a reality TV personality named Madison LaCroix. It was never fully confirmed. Rodriguez denied the serious implications. But the damage was done, and according to people close to Lopez, trust had become a serious issue, and a close friend of the singer said she had been pretty miserable and didn't think it was in her best interest to stay. The engagement was called off in April 2021. Lopez moved on, famously, almost immediately, and eventually married Ben Affleck in 2022, completing one of pop culture's most dramatic romantic roundabouts. Rodriguez, for his part, said publicly that he had no regrets. He described Lopez as the most talented human being he'd ever been around. He called her the greatest live performer in the world and spoke about her with nothing but admiration, at least publicly. But behind that composed exterior, the story being whispered right now suggests something very different was happening internally. And it may be more relevant to the Jacqueline Cordero split than anyone initially realized. Here's where things get genuinely interesting, and where speculation starts colliding with what sources are actually claiming. Because shortly after the news of the Jacqueline Cordero split broke in 2026, a separate and very pointed report began circulating. It claimed that Rodriguez had never fully gotten over Jennifer Lopez, and that once he became single again, reaching out to her felt, in his mind, inevitable. That's a loaded claim, and it's worth unpacking carefully. For context, Lopez had married Ben Affleck in 2022, but that marriage ended when she filed for divorce in 2024. Since then, she had publicly described herself as being in a positive and healthy new chapter of life. Meanwhile, Rodriguez had gone through Catherine Paget and then 3 years with Jacqueline Cordero, both relationships that, from the outside, looked serious and stable. But if the reports circulating in 2026 have any truth to them, the emotional chapter with Lopez may have never truly closed for him. Sources quoted in these reports described Rodriguez as someone who considered the Lopez relationship the most significant of his life, a love that his subsequent relationships were quietly measured against, whether he admitted it or not. Now, these are rumors. They are unverified. Lopez has not confirmed any contact. Rodriguez has said nothing publicly on the matter. But the timing is worth noting. A man ends a 3-year relationship. His most famous ex is single. Reports immediately surface suggesting he reached out. That's either a remarkable coincidence or a window into something that's been quietly unresolved for years. What it tells us, regardless of whether the Lopez rumors are accurate, is that A-Rod's emotional life has always run deeper and more complicated than his polished public image lets on. He is a man who controls narratives beautifully, professionally, with precision. But the narrative of his personal life keeps breaking loose and running in directions he clearly didn't plan for. And none of that happened in a vacuum. Because the man behind the relationships, the headlines, and the carefully worded statements is also a man who once stood at the center of the biggest scandal in the history of professional baseball and nearly lost everything. To understand Alex Rodriguez fully, you have to go back to the moment the floor gave way. Because for all his success, and it was staggering success, there is one chapter that follows him everywhere. One decision, or rather a series of decisions stretched across years, that cost him more than money, more than games, more than awards. It cost him the story he wanted to tell about himself. In 2009, Rodriguez admitted to using steroids during his time with the Texas Rangers from 2001 to 2003. But he insisted his years with the Yankees had been clean. The baseball world largely accepted that, or at least moved forward with it. Then came 2013, and the Biogenesis Clinic. And everything changed. MLB's investigation into the Biogenesis Clinic in South Florida revealed that its founder, Anthony Bosch, had been supplying players with synthetic testosterone, human growth hormone, and other banned substances. Rodriguez was the central name in that investigation. Not a peripheral figure. Not someone tangentially connected. The main name. Major League Baseball initially suspended him for 211 games, one of the most severe non-lifetime bans ever handed down for violations of the league's drug policy, covering both the substances obtained and the use that followed. Rodriguez appealed. He was the only one of 13 suspended players to do so. The others accepted their 50-game bans quietly. Rodriguez fought. He was the only one. And fighting it turned out to make everything worse. The arbitrator ultimately concluded that Rodriguez had not only obtained banned substances, but had actively tried to obstruct the league's investigation. The suspension was reduced slightly from 211 games to 162, which still stands as the longest non-lifetime ban in MLB history. It cost him an entire season and resulted in roughly $24 million in salary forfeited to the Yankees. But the financial damage was almost secondary to everything else. Rodriguez later said the scandal cost him over $40 million in total, his reputation, and potentially his place in the Baseball Hall of Fame, a distinction he called one of the most frustrating and self-inflicted losses of his life. He had a guaranteed contract worth hundreds of millions. He didn't need to cheat. And yet he did. He admitted that chronic pain in his hip and a relentless desire to keep producing big numbers drove him to make the choice. But when he reflected on it later, his own words were devastating. How stupid can you be? There was another layer to the scandal that quietly damaged him in ways the suspension never could. DEA documents later revealed that Rodriguez had named other players during the investigation, a move that was seen by many in the sport as a betrayal, given the unspoken code that exists among players when the league comes knocking. He had gone to war with MLB publicly, appealed loudly, and then, according to those documents, cooperated in ways that implicated teammates and peers. The optics were devastating. Rodriguez later described the suspension as the most embarrassing moment of his life, and said it was only through extensive therapy that he began to understand the deeper patterns driving his behavior, patterns he traced back to his childhood and the absence of his father. That's a significant admission from a man who spent decades projecting invincibility. His 2025 HBO documentary, Alex vs. A-Rod, dug deep into exactly this duality, exploring the transformation from Alex, a baseball prodigy abandoned by his father, to A-Rod, a decorated superstar driven by a relentless pursuit of greatness at any cost. The documentary was uncomfortable viewing for anyone who had spent years either worshipping or despising him, because it made the case that both versions of the man existed simultaneously and that the real tragedy wasn't the suspension. It was that he could see exactly who he was becoming and kept going anyway. Here's the part that makes the A-Rod story genuinely difficult to write off. Because after all of it, the scandal, the suspension, the public humiliation, the lost contracts, the J-Lo implosion, the courtroom battles, he came back. Not just personally. Financially, professionally, and strategically, he built something after baseball that most active players never come close to achieving. Alex Rodriguez's net worth as of 2025 to 2026 is estimated at around $350 million, with income drawn from his baseball career, media work, real estate, and long-term investments. That number sounds impressive in isolation. But consider what it took to get there after everything that happened, and it becomes something else entirely. Rodriguez co-founded Arod Corp back in 1995, initially focused on real estate.